Black billionaire girl's seat. Stolen by white passenger. Seconds later. Flight gets grounded. You're in my seat. Zara Williams's voice cuts through the first-class cabin of Flight 1247 like a blade. Clean, direct, certain. The white man in seat 2A doesn't look up from his phone, doesn't acknowledge her presence, doesn't even blink. No kid. I'm not. Derek Hamilton's dismissal sounds practiced automatic, but sweat beads on his forehead despite the cabin's cool air conditioning. His hands shake as he grips his phone, the tremor betraying everything. The desperate gamble he's taking, the lies he's about to tell, the assumptions he's betting will work in his favor. The Boeing 777 sits motionless on the LAX tarmac engines, humming with restrained power. Morning sunlight streams through oval windows, illuminating leather seats that smell like expensive possibilities. It's 6:45 a.m. on what should be a routine Tuesday flight to New York, but the air itself feels charged with tension. The cabin's gentle hum mingles with sounds of hurried passengers stowing luggage, flight attendants checking seatbelts, ground crews shouting instructions outside. But in this moment, in this specific row, time seems suspended. Zara stands perfectly still in the narrow aisle, her small frame blocking the flow of boarding passengers. At 11 years old, she appears unremarkable to most adults who glance her way. Average height, neat cornrows pulled back with a simple elastic band, modest black sweater and dark jeans that could belong to any middle-class child traveling with family. But there's something about her stillness that draws attention. Not fidgeting, not looking around nervously, not seeking adult help. Just waiting. Like she's done this before. Nothing about her appearance screams wealth or power, which is exactly how she prefers it. My boarding pass says Seat 2A, she states simply, her voice steady, despite the familiar knot forming in her stomach. That tight feeling she gets when adults look at her and make instant decisions about who she is and what she deserves. Derek finally glances up from his phone screen, his eyes taking in Zara with the same dismissive assessment he'd give a street vendor or parking attendant. He's 48 years old, salt and pepper hair styled to hide thinning spots, expensive Italian suit that can't quite conceal the stress lines carved around his eyes like battle scars. His briefcase sits open beside him, real estate contracts scattered across the tray table. Documents that once represented millions in commissions, prestigious clients, a reputation built over 20 years in Los Angeles luxury markets. Now they're just paper reminders of everything he's lost in the past 6 months. Derek studies Zara for a long moment, his mind calculating odds like a gambler at a poker table. A black child, traveling alone, claiming a first-class seat that costs more than some people's rent. In his worldview, shaped by decades of privilege and assumption, the math seems simple. Adults trump children. Confidence trumps truth, and white trumps everything else. At least, that's what he's betting his remaining reputation on. Look, Sweetie, Derek says, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension that makes nearby passengers unconsciously cringe. There's obviously been some kind of computer mix-up here. I always sit in 2A on this route. I'm a Diamond Elite member. Always. Diamond Elite. Two lies flowing so smoothly they sound like truth even to Derek's own ears. He's been rehearsing variations of this story since he walked down the jet bridge, his economy ticket, seat 34F middle row wedged between crying babies and cramped bathrooms, burning like shame in his jacket pocket. But admitting the truth means acknowledging that his real estate empire has crumbled, that his divorce stripped away half his remaining assets, that he's now flying economy, like the commoners he's spent his career looking down upon. Derek Hamilton has built his entire adult identity on the assumption that he deserves better than other people. He's not about to surrender that illusion now. Isabella Rodriguez approaches from the forward galley, her navy blue uniform crisp and pressed heels clicking against the cabin floor with practiced precision. At 32, she spent 8 years perfecting the art of reading airline passengers, their moods, their expectations, their likelihood of causing problems. Her eyes sweep the scene, quickly well-dressed businessman in expensive suit claiming his rightful space, young black girl disrupting the boarding process. The assessment happens in milliseconds, processed through years of experience that have taught her to trust certain visual cues over others. Smile, activating automatically. Isabella's body language already signals which passenger has her support. "Is there a problem here?" she asks, directing her question toward Derek rather than Zara. "Just a small seating confusion," Derek replies smoothly, his confidence growing as he senses Isabella's implicit alliance. This young lady seems to think she belongs in first class. Seems to think she belongs. The words hang in the recycled cabin air like cigarette smoke, carrying implications that make several nearby passengers shift uncomfortably. Zara feels them like physical weight settling on her shoulders, the familiar burden of having to prove her right to exist in spaces others take for granted. Her throat tightens. The old familiar sting creeps up her chest. She's heard variations of this phrase her entire life. Different airports, different adults, same assumptions wrapped in polite language that cuts deeper than outright hostility. The dismissal that comes disguised as concern. The racism that hides behind age discrimination. For just a moment, doubt whispers in her ear. Maybe she should just move. Avoid the stairs. Make things easier for everyone. But then she remembers her father's words. Never make yourself smaller for other people's comfort. "I don't think I belong here," Zara says quietly, her voice carrying a calm strength that surprises everyone within earshot. "I know I belong here, because I paid for this seat 3 weeks ago." Isabella glances at Zara's boarding pass, a quick perfunctory look designed to satisfy protocol rather than actually verify facts. She doesn't scan it into the system, doesn't check it against the reservation database, doesn't do any of the things her training manual specifically requires for disputed seating situations. Instead, she makes calculations based on appearances, assumptions, and 8 years of experience that have taught her to trust confident adults over uncertain children, especially when those adults look like they belong in first-class cabins, and those children don't match her mental image of business-class passengers. "Honey, let me help you find your real seat." Isabella says, her tone warm but patronizing in the way that makes Zara's jaw clench slightly. Sometimes the computer system gets confused and prints boarding passes for the wrong sections. It happens to kids a lot. The casual dismissal stings because it's delivered with such gentle certainty. Isabella isn't being intentionally cruel. She genuinely believes she's helping a confused child avoid embarrassment. But her conviction about what Zara deserves based on nothing but visual assessment reveals assumptions she's never been forced to examine. 3 rows behind them, Marcus Williams grips his business class armrests so tightly his knuckles have turned white. The former NASA engineer sits rigid in seat 8C, watching his daughter navigate this familiar minefield of adult expectations and childhood reality. Every parental instinct screams at him to stand up, walk forward, and end this confrontation with his adult male presence. His engineer's mind has already calculated 17 different ways to solve this problem quickly and efficiently. But his heart knows something. His mind keeps forgetting. Zara asked him to let her handle these moments herself. The world she's entering, tech leadership, international business, diplomatic summits with heads of state, won't always have him there to fight her battles. She needs to know she can stand on her own against whatever prejudice throws at her. Still watching his brilliant, calm daughter face down grown adults who've decided she doesn't belong somewhere never gets easier. The protective rage builds in his chest like steam in a pressure cooker. "I'm not confused," Zara replies to Isabella, her poise never wavering despite the heat building behind her eyes. "Mr.?" She looks at Derek expectantly, eyebrows raised in polite inquiry. "Hamilton," He supplies automatically, then immediately realizes his tactical error. Now she has his name. Now this becomes personal rather than anonymous. Now there's accountability attached to whatever happens next. Derek's confidence wavers for just a moment as something about this child's calculated calm bothers him. Most kids would be intimidated by adult authority figures eager to avoid confrontation, grateful for any face-saving exit offered by helpful grown-ups. This one seems prepared, like she's been through this exact scenario before and knows exactly how it usually plays out. The realization unsettles him more than he wants to admit, Mr. Hamilton. Zara continues, her voice steady as granite. Could you please show me your boarding pass? The simple request lands in the first-class cabin like a depth charge detonating in deep water. Ripples of tension spread outward as other passengers sense the shift in dynamics, the moment when polite confusion transforms into direct challenge. Because Derek's boarding pass shows seat 34F, economy class. Row 34 middle seat, wedged between strangers and screaming infants and the constant queue for airplane bathrooms. No upgrades, no frequent flyer benefits, no legitimate claim to the leather seat he's currently occupying like a throne. Just the cold, documented reality of a man whose business has failed so completely he can't afford the lifestyle he's spent decades pretending represents his natural birthright. I don't need to show you anything. Derek snaps his carefully constructed mask of reasonable authority, cracking like ice under sudden pressure. The harshness in his voice draws immediate attention from surrounding passengers. A businessman across the aisle lowers his Wall Street Journal. An elderly couple near the window stops their whispered conversation about connecting flights. Dr. Elena Vasquez, seated in 3C with education policy research spread across her tray table, looks up with the sharp curiosity of someone who recognizes power dynamics shifting in real time. Isabella watches this exchange with mounting discomfort, her 8 years of experience telling her something is going very wrong with what should be a simple passenger management situation. Usually these things resolve quickly when adult authority asserts itself over childhood confusion. But this child isn't acting confused, and this adult is acting increasingly defensive rather than reasonably helpful. The script she's used successfully hundreds of times before seems to be failing in some fundamental way she doesn't understand. Let me call my supervisor. Isabella decides, reaching for her communication headset with fingers that tremble slightly. Sarah Mitchell approaches from the rear galley, her 24-year-old energy radiating nervous tension as she surveys the developing situation. With only 6 months of flight attendant experience, she still takes all her cues from senior staff about how to handle difficult passengers and unusual circumstances. Her eager-to-please demeanor immediately aligns with Isabella's apparent assessment of the situation. "What's the problem back here?" Sarah asks quietly, her voice carrying just far enough to be overheard by passengers who are now openly watching the confrontation unfold. "Seating issue," Isabella explains in hushed professional tones. "Child got confused about her seat assignment. Computer error, probably. The child. Not Miss Williams. Not our passenger. Not even the girl. The child." As if Zara's age automatically negates her customer status, her right to the service she's purchased her basic human worth in airline hierarchy. Derek watches this exchange with growing confidence mixed with growing desperation. The flight crew is clearly on his side, but their support is based on assumptions that won't survive actual scrutiny of boarding passes and reservation systems. His heart pounds as he realizes he's committed to a path that leads either to complete victory or total humiliation, with no middle ground available. But the part of him that once built a successful business, that once earned genuine respect through actual achievement, knows with absolute certainty that what he's doing is wrong, has always been wrong, will always be wrong regardless of how this particular confrontation ends. The knowledge sits in his stomach like a stone he can't digest. He spreads his work materials across the tray table, with theatrical authority claiming the space around seat 2A like a flag planted on conquered territory. Legal documents, property listings, business cards, the props of success arranged to project competence and belonging. But his hands continue trembling as he shuffles papers that represent a real estate empire crumbling faster than he can rebuild it. Every contract in that briefcase is either canceled, disputed, or desperately behind schedule. His reputation in Los Angeles is so damaged that former clients cross streets to avoid awkward conversations. This airplane seat was supposed to be his salvation, the image of continued success that might convince his last remaining potential investor that Derek Hamilton was still a player worth backing in the luxury real estate market. Instead, it's becoming the stage for his final, complete destruction. Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusts her reading glasses and studies the unfolding confrontation with growing fascination. As an education policy expert who has spent 20 years working with gifted children from diverse backgrounds, something about this composed young woman triggers deep recognition. The intelligent way she speaks, the careful precision of her word choices, the calm strength that seems far beyond her apparent age, the complete lack of intimidation in the face of adult authority. Something bothers her about how this situation is developing, but she can't immediately identify what. So she stays silent, taking mental notes about power dynamics and unconscious bias patterns that will probably end up in her next research paper. Kevin Taylor appears within 2 minutes of Isabella's call, his supervisor stripes, and 12 years of company experience radiating practiced competence. At 38, he's built a reputation for resolving passenger conflicts quickly and quietly, keeping flights on schedule and customer complaints to a minimum. He takes in the scene with automatic efficiency, expensive businessman defending his legitimate space, young black girl, creating operational delays, experienced flight crew seeking backup to maintain order and schedule adherence. His assessment happens instantaneously, processed through years of training that have taught him to prioritize certain passenger types over others, to trust visual cues about who belongs where to resolve conflicts in favor of whoever seems most likely to generate corporate complaints if dissatisfied. The judgment is immediate, automatic, and completely wrong. What seems to be the problem here, Kevin asks, directing his question exclusively toward Derek, rather than acknowledging Zara's presence in any meaningful way. Simple computer error. Derek lies with growing fluency, his voice gaining strength from Kevin's implicit support and the sense that airline authority is aligning behind his version of events. I've been upgraded to first class due to my Diamond Elite status, but somehow this child received a boarding pass for my assigned seat. The deception has evolved and expanded, now fed by desperation and audience validation. Not just claiming the seat, but inventing an upgrade that never existed, a status he's never earned, a computer glitch that conveniently explains away the inconvenient presence of a black child in premium seating. Each lie builds on the previous one, creating an elaborate fictional structure that requires constant maintenance, but feels increasingly real to Derek as he tells it. I see Kevin nods with the satisfied certainty of a man whose worldview has been confirmed rather than challenged. Adults belong in first class. Children get confused about airline procedures. Simple problems have simple solutions when you trust your experience over contradictory evidence. Miss Kevin addresses Zara with the patronizing tone adults reserve for children who need gentle correction and guidance back to their proper place. We'll get you sorted into a nice seat in the main cabin. No charge for any inconvenience this computer error might have caused. Please scan both boarding passes. Zara requests her voice carrying a slight edge for the first time since this confrontation began. The careful control is starting to crack slightly as the familiar pain of dismissal seeps through her defenses. It will take 30 seconds to verify the actual facts. The logic is unassailable. The solution is obvious. Scan 2 pieces of paper, check them against the computer system. Resolve the dispute with documentation rather than assumption. Any reasonable person would immediately see this as the fastest, fairest way forward. But Kevin has already chosen his narrative, already decided who belongs where, based on appearances and expectations that run deeper than conscious thought. He's committed to supporting Derek's version of events, regardless of what the actual evidence might reveal. "We don't need to verify our passengers' integrity," Kevin says with firm conviction, his voice carrying the weight of company policy and unquestionable adult authority. "We trust our frequent flyers. We need to resolve this situation quickly so we can complete our departure preparations and maintain our schedule." Zara's chest tightens as the familiar pattern plays out exactly as she knew it would. She's felt this before. Adults deciding her worth before knowing her story, dismissing her voice before hearing her words, choosing comfortable assumptions over inconvenient facts. The casual dismissal, the automatic support for whoever looks like they belong, the refusal to examine evidence that might challenge preconceived notions about who deserves what. But she breathes steady and deep the way her father taught her during their practice sessions for difficult meetings. Calm is control. Control is power. Power comes from within, not from other people's approval or recognition. Young Lady Kevin continues his tone, taking on a warning quality that makes several nearby passengers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I need you to move to the main cabin immediately so we can complete our boarding process and depart on time. The threat is implicit but unmistakable. Comply with adult authority or face escalating consequences. This is how the system works. This is how it's always worked. Children defer to adults, minorities defer to whites, and everyone eventually finds their proper place in the established hierarchy." No. The word drops into the cabin like a stone through glass, shattering decades of assumption about how these situations always end. Clear, final, uncompromising, delivered without raised voice or dramatic gesture, but carrying the absolute certainty of someone who has decided where she stands and refuses to be moved from that position. The single syllable creates a moment of perfect silence in the bustling cabin. Several passengers stop mid-conversation. Flight attendants pause in their safety preparations. Even the background noise of engine warming and ground crew activity seems to fade. "Excuse me." Kevin's voice sharpens like a blade being drawn, his calm cracking for the first time as he encounters unexpected resistance to his authority. "I said, no." Zara repeats her 11-year-old voice, carrying a strength that surprises everyone within earshot. "I will not move from my legitimate seat to make room for someone else's lie." Lie. She said it directly now, the accusation Derek hoped would never surface the truth that transforms his computer error narrative into something far more serious and legally problematic. The word hangs in the air between them like a challenge that cannot be ignored or dismissed. "Now wait just a minute." Derek blusters, but his voice wavers with uncertainty as part of him, the part buried beneath months of justification and rationalization, recognizes the absolute accuracy of her statement. "You're sitting in seat 2A, Zara says with surgical precision, her voice cutting through Derek's protests like a scalpel through tissue. "Your boarding pass shows seat 34F. Those are facts, not opinions. Those are what actually happened, not what you wish had happened." Kevin's face flushes red as he realizes this simple passenger management situation has transformed into something far more complex and potentially problematic than his training prepared him to handle. Children are supposed to be intimidated by adult authority figures, eager to avoid confrontation, grateful for any accommodation offered by helpful airline staff. They're not supposed to stand their ground with legal precision and moral clarity that exposes the fundamental unfairness of the entire system. "Young lady, if you don't cooperate immediately, we'll have to call security to escort you from this aircraft." Kevin announces, his voice carrying across the first-class cabin loud enough for every passenger to hear clearly. The threat hangs in the recycled air like a sword suspended over Zara's head. Remove the black child rather than verify the truth. Preserve the white adult's comfort rather than investigate his claims. Maintain the established order rather than risk discovering that the system itself might be fundamentally corrupted. The cabin falls almost completely silent except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of